let me address it in two ways. Maybe one for the individual who might actually themselves struggle with same-sex attractions, but they are Christians and they're committed to following God and not acting on those. I want to kind of maybe give a few encouraging words to them, but then I also want to say something for the rest who may not experience same-sex attractions, but they have a desire to seek and save the lost. So how would we reach out to those in the community that might identify as LGBT, or they might, whatever, act on it in a way? So two groups. And you might be a person right now, if you're watching Rajat and I and have this conversation, and maybe you have that, and no one else knows, that your family doesn't know, your community doesn't know, and you're scared. I want you to know this: you're not alone. The enemy, he wants us to feel like no one else understands you. One of the best weapons of Satan is isolation. He wants to isolate us from everyone that can help us and walk with us and encourage us and point us to Jesus. So what he's doing is actually, he's winning the Bible by making us believe the lie that no one understands you, that you're all alone. That's a lie. I would love for you to reach out to me. I'm not next door to you. I'm not close to you in India, but, email. I think a lot of people have email. Shoot me an email. And at least, letting another person know is really helpful. I would encourage you, to reach out to others. Rajat has such a big heart from what I've just, gotten to know. And he has a desire for the lost and to communicate truth. And so I think seeking other people, even in your community, that understand the truth of God, but they also understand the grace of God. I think that's very important, because sometimes people are either one way or the other. They're either lots of truth, but then they don't understand God's grace. But then you have others that are just all grace, but then there's no truth or very little truth. So we have to not be truth at the expense of grace, not grace at the expense of truth, but like Jesus, John 1:14, full of grace and full of truth. So I would encourage you to seek that out. But a few other things: do not be identified by your attractions. I would not call yourself, because oftentimes we talk to ourselves, right? I am this way, I'm that way. But we need to tell it, no, this is not who I am. Yes, I might have these attractions, and I didn't ask for them. But remember, none of us asked to come from Adam. None of us asked or wanted to be impacted by the fall. That's just the reality, being human. So don't beat yourself up about it. You're no really different from anyone else. We're all sinners. We're all broken. We all need Christ, but don't feel like you're alone, and don't identify by your sexuality. Now, for others who maybe that's the rest of you watching, and I'm going to guess maybe you're watching because you have a heart, and you say, you know what, the church, we have to improve. We have treated this as the worst sin. It's sin, but it's not the worst sin. There's a difference. And I want to see my neighbor or my coworker or maybe my nephew or cousin who identifies as LGBTQ. I want them to come to know Christ. I mean, I even know in India, I think there's this common practice of men dressing up as women. It's kind of a big cultural thing. They need Jesus. Even these, they're created in the image of God. That's what's so amazing, that God didn't just limit which human beings are created in God's image. Every individual, even the transgender person, even the homosexual activist, they're all created in God's image. But the goal is that we want to point them to Christ so that they will not just be created in God's image, but they will be sons and daughters of God. We sometimes confuse those two. Sometimes we think image of God is the same thing as child of God. No, that's not the way the Bible talks about it. Every human being is created in the image of God, but not every human being is a child of God. As Paul calls it, we were all children of wrath. And it's only through Jesus, who then reconciles us to God, that then God adopts us as sons and daughters, that then we become children of God only because of Jesus, by grace through faith in Christ. So I would encourage us, we need to we need to do what we can and be intentional to reach out. And I know it might be countercultural. I know people are going to maybe talk, talk about you behind their back. What are they doing? They're talking to that person who's heathen or that person who's gay. Well, I often tell people, we need to even invite people over for coffee or have dinner with them. And people think, but if I do that, am I condoning their sin? And again, that's a good question. But if we think about it, we usually have dinner with sinners, right? I mean, there's nothing new. We're always eating with sinners. Eating with someone and sitting with someone is quite different. But we need to build a relationship to hopefully then have the context of friendship and trust to then be able to talk about our faith. Just as we would reach out to maybe my Buddhist friend or maybe your Hindu friend or Muslim friend, we're not going to first go at them with truth. We're going to build a relationship with them and build trust and show them that I do care for you and I want to get to know you. And then it's in this context then that we can bring these apologetic truths that we have about the existence of God, and not even talking about morality yet, because I think oftentimes as Christians, we want to go there first and we don't want to say, well, this is sin and I want to warn you, don't do this. And it's a good intention, but I think better than that, because that can turn them off. Better than that is to first talk about the existence of God and Jesus Christ. For example, if someone says, do you think homosexuality is sin? Well, that's kind of a debating stance. And sometimes Christians will then jump right in and be like, no, I don't. Well, then you kind of go back and forth. Well, that doesn't really expand. And let's just say I convince them that it's sin. At the end of the day, if they don't know Jesus, they're still lost. So instead, what you can do, if they say, do you think this is sin? I would say, I know you don't even believe in God yet. So what does it matter what God thinks? So instead of talking about what God thinks, let's first talk about the existence of God. You see how I'm turning the conversation right around to a very apologetic, conversation, because that's when I have these conversations about the existence of God, his son, Jesus Christ, his word, that can lead to salvation. If I simply kind of have these conversations about morality, well, morality never saves anyone. So I want to deflect to the more important question all the time. It's the more redemptive question that then helps us to point people to the salvific work of Jesus Christ. So really, the overall kind of theme is that we want to point people to Christ, not to just morality. And that means that we have to live that out first. I tell people, before you preach the gospel, which is so important, we need to live it. We have to live the gospel.